Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is What If Godlike Akatsuki Naruto Built Harem with Ino Haku And Kurotsuchi Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. There he is. Get the demon. A loud shout came out in the dark stillness of the night. Men and women with torches and other tools they happened to pick up. Avenge the fourth. The target of their assault was none other than a recently turned, 6-year-old boy. He was kicked from the orphanage a year prior to this day. So far for one entire year he lived on the streets, finding alleyways and different training fields to sleep in. He scrounged trash cans and garbage dumps for anything to use as clothing or blankets. He ate whatever filth he could possibly find to keep himself from starving to death. He hoped there was a light at the end of this endless dark tunnel that his life was. Deep within this 6-year-old's mindscape, the demon was giving him directions. He was telling the boy where to go and how to get out. Naruto, being a 6-year-old, didn't really know who was giving him directions, but he just went with it. Only hoping that he could get away from it all. He suddenly came across a small stand with a sign that read, Ichiraku Ramen. The boy suddenly charged in and hid behind the counter and hugged the leg of the shop owner, Tuki. The old ramen stand owner looked down at the boy and suddenly recognized who it was. Those whisker marks were a dead giveaway. He heard of the things that his neighbors said about the boy, some of them were quite horrendous, while others were just ridiculous, but he lived in an anti-Naruto neighborhood. He didn't want to lose any customers by allowing the boy to stay hidden, so the old man was about to raise his ramen ladle to beat the child, but he saw the deep blue eyes that this little boy had. The eyes that no child should even have. His eyes showed pain and sorrow that most adults don't even experience. The little boy was bleeding profusely, but he was alright somehow. The old man called for his 9-year-old daughter Ayame to come and take the boy to their apartment behind the stand. Tuki was suddenly met by a large crowd of people with torches and weapons. "May I help?" Tuki was rudely cut off by the leader. He glared at the ramen shop owner, but answered Tuki's question anyway. "We are looking for the demon brat Tuki." The leader slammed his fist into Tuki's counter, breaking a large part of it. "We saw the creature running down this street. Now I want to know what happened, or we will destroy your little shop." "Now what will it be, old man?" Tuki glared at the man with little care in his eyes. The old man looked at the leader of the mob with a defiant eye. "I do not know what you are talking about." Tuki's face was suddenly smashed into the counter. The old man stumbled back, but he was grabbed by the collar of his shirt. A very real wakizashi was held to his throat. "Liar. The other shop owners on this street saw you tell your daughter to take him into your apartment. Now we all know where your allegiance lies, and it's not with Konoha." The leader smirked at Tuki. "I used to respect you, old man. Ransack this terrible restaurant." The mob charged in and began to break the wooden chairs and began to destroy the wooden countertops. Tuki was suddenly stabbed in the abdomen by the leader of the mob and dropped onto the floor like he was garbage. Suddenly Ayame and Naruto showed up. Both were being held by their necks by a massive man. "Time to die, demon brat." The leader was about to behead Naruto, but something unexpected happened. 2 Anbu ninja showed up in an explosion of smoke. One Anbu had a dog mask while the other had a weasel mask. Both looked to Ayame and Naruto and bowed slightly before speaking out. "Weasel, go bring the man to the hospital as quickly as possible." The Anbu nodded and bent down to lift Tuki to his feet. The Anbu then shunshined as quickly as possible and left the dog-masked Anbu by himself. The remaining Anbu drew out his tanto and looked at the men around him. The Inu-masked Anbu swung his tanto with such speed and precision. The blade cut off the large man's hands. Naruto and Ayame choked slightly before regaining their composure. The Anbu didn't even take a second look at the handless man. "All of you, by order of the Hokage. You are all under arrest." 50 clones popped into existence and put binding jutsu on the assailants of the three innocent people. Yane. Naruto. The next morning, Naruto awoke in a hospital bed. The white was blinding to the young boy. He gripped his head tightly. A major headache had resided in his temples. The 6-year-old sighed deeply as it finally clicked that he was in the hospital once again. He scratched his head in annoyance and blinked a few times. He yawned and looked around the room slightly hoping that someone came to his hospital room. He smiled brightly when his eyes laid upon the powerful figure known as Hiruzen Sarutobi. Naruto-kun, Hiruzen gave the boy a sad smile. Are you feeling better? Hi Gigi. Naruto said while scratching the back of his head. How am I here? 2 Anbu protected you, but by the time they finished disposing of the mob, you passed out from blood loss. Hiruzen downcast slightly. Naruto sighed. Gigi, can I ask you something? Naruto looked up at his grandfather. Anything Naruto-kun. Hiruzen replied. I want to become a shinobi. Naruto said with deep conviction. Those Anbu were powerful. I saw how those people looked at the Anbu. They looked at them with respect and fear. And then they look at you with even more respect and fear. Naruto then had an epiphany. Even better than just a shinobi. What is Naruto-kun? Hiruzen asked. I'll become Hokage. He shouted in happiness. I will become Hokage one day, old man. One day indeed, Naruto-kun. Hiruzen gave the boy a genuine smile. But, I have another question, Naruto said. What is it, Naruto-kun? Hiruzen asked for the umpteenth time. Not that he minded. How do I go about becoming a shinobi? Naruto asked. Just yesterday, I became 6. Oh, how could I forget? Hiruzen gave the blonde child a beaming smile. By law, every eligible child must be tested for chakra reserves, and if they have enough they will be entered into the ninja academy. I wanna do that, Naruto said with his childlike happiness resurfacing. How do I do that? Naruto asked with his head tilted slightly. Haha. Don't worry Naruto-kun. We can go to the academy to get tested for chakra later when you get out later. Hiruzen said. How about I get out right now? Naruto asked. Ha, I know you heal fast, but you can't heal that quickly. You had cuts and deep bruises all over your body last night. Hiruzen gave a hearty laugh. I am Naruto the Great. Naruto shouted out. I can't be held back by some little cuts. I'm going to be Hokage one day. Indeed you will be Naruto-kun, but one thing at a time. Rest for now. I'll be back in a few hours, and if you're fine, then I'll get you tested for chakra. Hiruzen got up and left the room. Sleep tight Naruto-kun. A few hours later. This can't be. All that is required is at least a score of 2000, but this kid is going into the high 100,000s, and there's no sign of stopping either. Hiruzen and the instructors at the academy were staring at Naruto's chakra level tests and gawked at the sheer amount the boy had, and the machine hadn't even started calculating the Kyuubi. Naruto sat in front of them still channeling chakra. The machine's calculation already had 2 sets of zeros and it continued to rise. Hiruzen did a quick calculation of the numbers and surmised that Naruto could spit out tons of A and B ranked ninjutsu without feeling tired or even losing half of his chakra reserves, and probably 1 or 2 S ranked before he runs out of half, with the right amount of chakra control that is. Okami, this kid could damn well take the Hokage seat right now. Okay. Naruto, you can stop channeling chakra now. Hiruzen said as his chakra levels just got calculated well into the millions. The number just kept rising as Naruto continued to exert chakra from his system. But I can still go. Naruto smiled and surged even more chakra. Take this. Naruto went all out and surged so much chakra that the machine exploded from overexertion. The last number the machine was able to calculate to was a startling 12 billion. The same amount that Hashirama was believed to be at, when he was at his prime. Not when he was a child. Everyone present looked in complete awe. Some of the anti-Naruto teachers lost their hatred and replaced it with complete undeterred respect for the kid. No one in the history of the academy had been able to do such a thing. Hiruzen looked to the instructors with a wide smile and was replied with the same smile from the teachers as well. Sweet. Naruto jumped up from the ground that he was thrown to. I am totally gonna become Hokage. Calm down, Naruto. One of the teachers laughed. Sorry, Naruto said with a blush of embarrassment. Can I ask who you are? My name is Iruka Yumino. I'll be your instructor for the next 7 years. Iruka gave him a small smile. And congratulations on destroying the machine. It only cost the academy 200,000 ryo. Iruka said with a sarcastic mirth to his voice. Again, sorry. Naruto gave an embarrassed laugh. It's alright, Hiruzen said with a smile. Naruto, come on. We will go and buy supplies for you. Alright, Gigi. Naruto ran up to the Hokage's side and held a small part of his robe with his small hands. 1 year later, after 1 whole year of training and working on the shinobi arts, Naruto had excelled as a chakra and stamina freak to the point that he couldn't do any simple academy jutsu. At least the constant attacks stopped. But he was made fun of as the dead last. It wasn't his fault though, he just had too much chakra to control. It was like trying to stop a tsunami with a sheet of paper. Yeah, it's not going to happen. Naruto struggled so much in class. While most civilians left the boy alone once he was enrolled into the academy, but some of the instructors that Naruto had were assholes and screwed with the young boy's academics. But putting his school life aside, Naruto was basically a loner, except for the fact that he was friends with Choji, the resident fatass, and Shikamaru, the resident lazy. They became friends shortly after they were enrolled into the academy. Well, it was mainly because Shikamaru's father made him do it. Choji was going to become friends with Naruto either way because he was the only one that didn't make fun of him because of his weight. Naruto came to class late today and was forced to sit next to the also popular Uchiha. Naruto didn't understand what the deal was with him. In Naruto's eyes, the Uchiha was just another kid. The only difference was that he was from a more prominent and powerful clan than the others in his class. And what was up with the hairdo? Who was he trying to impress? The mother duckling in the pond outside in the playground. Naruto sighed and pulled out a seat and sat next to Sasuke. Neither of them spoke a word to each other, but the tension was there. Naruto was a lonely orphan sitting next to son of the clan head to the largest clan in Konoha. But all of that changed one fateful night. Naruto came back to the academy the next day expecting another empty day filled with nothing because the oh-so-important Uchiha was nowhere to be found, but instead, his ears were enticed by the rumor of the Uchiha massacre. Naruto's ears perked up. Sasuke was now an orphan. Naruto smiled sadly to himself. Sasuke's eyes were empty and devoid of emotion. There's someone like me now. Later that day, the blonde boy was walking on his own near the Naka River. His hands were in his pockets. He looked to a playground nearby and scowled when he saw how happy some kids were with their families. He hated being alone. Even the old man had stopped coming over to his apartment. So Naruto continued taking the scenic route towards his home until he came across a strange sight. Sasuke Uchiha was sitting on the platform jutting from the side of the river. He was staring out into the sunset but then looked up and glared at Naruto from the crest of the hill behind him. Sasuke then shut his eyes. Naruto, Sasuke called out with a weak voice instead of the one he used in class. Can I ask you something? Naruto froze and shut his eyes. He took a deep breath, contemplating whether he should walk off or go and talk to the lonely Uchiha. Naruto steeled his resolve and turned around and headed down the steps of the hill and got ready to sit next to Sasuke, who surprisingly moved over to give the boy some space. When Naruto sat down, there was a very sad silence that went off between the two of them. Naruto, do you know what it's like? Sasuke asked, breaking the silence. I mean, do you know what it's like to be alone? Sasuke asked. What do you mean, Sasuke? Naruto asked. It only happened 2 nights ago, don't you? I know it did, but I was told to seek help instead of bottling it all in. Sasuke replied. I am an orphan now, so the only plausible thought was to ask you, no offense. None taken. Naruto replied. He looked out to the small waves in the river and heaved a sigh. And yeah, I know what it's like. How do you deal with it? Sasuke asked. It's hard, but you can manage as long as you have people with you to help you through it. Naruto then went off to spill his life story. Sasuke got angry and disgusted at many of the atrocities that the villagers caused to the blonde boy next to him. And then I blew up the chakra reading machine thingy. Naruto gave a little laugh at the memory from a year ago. And then I became friends with Choji and Shika, and then here we are now. You make it sound easy, Sasuke said. It's because I was able to get all of that off of my chest. Naruto said. Now you try. Fine. Sasuke then spilled his life story. All the way to the Uchiha massacre. Then Itachi told me, there is a great darkness ahead. Be wary, little brother. And then he hit me with a Tsukuyomi, and then I woke up in a hospital the next day. Sasuke watched Naruto's reaction throughout the entire retelling of the night, and was happy that the boy got angry and felt repulsed at the same points that he himself was. Damn, Naruto looked back into the river. You actually had a family whereas I didn't. Your pain is probably worse than mine. No, Sasuke said suddenly. Naruto looked at the black-eyed boy with surprise, but started smiling when Sasuke started smiling himself. We are orphans. Our pain is the same. Naruto. Naruto perked up to the boy. Will you help me take down my brother? Sasuke asked. Damn straight, but will you help me become Hokage? Naruto asked back. Hell yeah, Sasuke said with a widening smile. Friends? Naruto asked as he held out his hand for Sasuke to take. No. Naruto's smile faltered slightly. Why not? Naruto asked, slightly hurt. We'll be something even better. Brothers. Sasuke took out a kunai. What are you? Naruto's eyes widened when Sasuke slashed his palm open with the kunai. Sasuke winced slightly. Do the same. The Uchiha ordered. Naruto drew out a kunai and dug the blade into his palm and slashed it open, drawing a large gash open into his palm. Blood poured from their hands. Now what? Naruto asked. The cut started burning slightly. We shake hands. Sasuke and Naruto grabbed each other's slashed hand and shook tightly. We are officially blood brothers. What's a blood brother? Naruto asked with a confused face. A blood brother is what we of the Uchiha clan did with clansmen that we were close to. We fight, train, study, and do everything as brothers. Like family. Sasuke said with a small glint in his eyes. What do you say? Naruto weighed the pros and cons, and smiled brightly when the pros drastically outweighed the cons. I accept, Ni-san. Many weeks later, Naruto was happy. He finally had a person to call brother, and said brother was rich, had a large compound, had huge training grounds, and best of all, had a massive jutsu library. He and Sasuke also ran across some stuff in Itachi's old room that ranged from huge suitcases filled with money from bounties he collected as an anbu, to boxes of Pocky, and the best of them all for the two adolescent boys was the limited edition glass case of the Ika Paradise books by Jiraiya of the Sannin. It ranged from the famous orange, all the way to almost non-existent gray. They were also in numerical order. Naruto and Sasuke smiled brightly when they opened the gray Ika book. Its cover said in bold letters, Ika Paradise, the Space Edition. Riku takes a spin in space. Sasuke and Naruto giggled perversely for the next few days as they read through each book. Each one filling their child minds, thus ruining their childhood completely. Their minds became that of closet perverts in one afternoon. Oh, the wondrousness that Ika is. The two of them also ran across another book underneath Itachi's bed. How to Screw with People, Especially Little Siblings. Are you fucking kidding me? Sasuke and Naruto deadpanned when they saw the title. But when they opened the book, they received the greatest wake-up call of their lives. It's time to prank the shit out of people. A few years later, Naruto and Sasuke were smiling like idiots as they sat down from returning from recess. Naruto made a quick count of his classmates like he always did, but then realized that one of them was missing. He looked to Sasuke and gave him a knowing look, and they both charged outside and found that one of them was missing indeed. It was the blonde heiress that Naruto had started growing a crush on for a while. She was surrounded by a bunch of boys. She looked in distress and seemed royally pissed off. Naruto was about to charge in, but Sasuke stopped him and shook his head. Sasuke mouthed the words, "Just watch." Naruto was reluctant but nodded his head. Ino suddenly sent a haymaker punch into one of the boy's jaws and sent him flying into a tree. The rest seemed pissed off, but Ino rammed her fist into another boy and sent that boy into another behind him. Ino then jumped up and rammed her foot into another boy and brought her foot around and rocketed it into another boy's groin. Both Sasuke and Naruto covered their groins as the high-pitched scream reverberated in their ears. The unimaginable nightmares that they had after reading about Ryu getting the same punishment from Riku and Hana in the Ika Ika series. Sasuke and Naruto were crying anime tears as the thoughts of receiving the same started floating in their minds, but then they heard it. The loud scream of pain and anguish followed by a shout of pure rage. They both hopped up to the second-floor window and stared into Iruka's classroom to see all of the students laughing at a singed Iruka covered in itching powder. The two boys laughed even harder and high-fived each other. But they high-fived a little too loud. They looked back into the classroom to see Iruka glaring death upon the two boys. "You two are gonna get it now," Iruka screamed with his big head jutsu activated. A true ninja should be able to survive this fall. The teacher opened the window and threw some itching powder on the two boys, causing them to lose their grip. All the while, Iruka was laughing like a maniac. They fell while trying to relieve themselves of the itching sensation, only to fall on the two remaining bullies that surrounded Ino. She looked at the two most popular boys in her class, even though one was a genius and the other was a retard. She gave Naruto a small smile and nodded a thank you at the two and ran back into the building. She didn't even notice Iruka's big head jutsu still activated with him still laughing like a psychopath. Sasuke then looked to Naruto. "Think it's time to go ahead with stage 2. Naruto then nodded his head with a devious smile on his face. Kai. Suddenly a weak explosive tag attached to a desk behind Iruka went off and sent him flying out of the classroom window and into the pond in the playground. After he splashed about, he found the two pranksters and picked them up by their collars and scowled deeply at his star student and his worst. Another year goes by. "Sasuke ni?" Naruto asked. "Do you think I have a chance with Ino?" The boy asked his brother. "Maybe, maybe not," Sasuke sighed. "Out of all of the annoying girls in this class, I'd probably date Sakura." Sakura. Naruto choked on his spit. "Why? She's the loudest one." Naruto growled the last part. I know. But she has potential. I have a really good feeling that she could be the one." "Yeah, and I'll be a dolphin." Naruto sighed and looked to the front door. He took a deep breath and faced the front of the class. Ino then walked in with her popular strut like she did since the new year started. Naruto didn't really like it, but who was he to judge? He sighed and sat back waiting for the inevitable trigger of their prank. Shikamaru and Choji walked into the classroom and sat in front of the two boys and smiled brightly when Sasuke filled them in on what they had done. Then it happened. Iruka walked into the classroom with a cautious pace. He eyed the floor, ceiling and even eyed the desks. Turns out that Sasuke and Naruto were trying to break their previous record of 17 pranks in 1 week and they were already at 17. All they needed was one more and their record was broken, and today was the last day of the school week. Iruka took a deep breath and eyed the four boys who were smiling like mad scientists. He nervously trekked from the door to his desk. The moment he moved his seat over for him to sit, he went up in a pillar of flames. When the flames died down, it came to reveal a deeply singed Iruka, but before the fire would continue to do any damage, a bucket of ice cubes fell from one of the ceiling boards and toppled its contents down onto Iruka. Sasuke, Naruto, Shikamaru and Choji were on the floor holding their sides as their laughter was sucking the air from their lungs. Iruka then pulled out 3 kunai with paper tags attached to them and hurled them with deadly accuracy and embedded them into the desks in front of each student respectively. The tags said in big bold letters, "Detention." What a wonderful way to start the day, huh, Sasuke? Silence held the classroom as everyone came to realize that the 2 pranksters were nowhere to be found. Iruka was cursing to himself as he and 3 other Chunin were searching everywhere for the 2. Iruka was covered in pink paint and the 3 Chunin accompanying him were drenched in ice-cold water filled with baby squids. 2 of the Chunin had tentacle marks on their cheeks and hands. "I swear when I find those 2, one of the Chunin growled. "I know how you feel." Iruka growled as well. But up above them, hidden by the ceiling boards was a black-haired Uchiha and a blonde-haired Uzumaki. They were snickering to the point that they were near hyperventilation. Their noses were clenched tight by wraps. In their hands were kunai with a special explosive tag attached to it. The seal kanji of course said explode, but its contents were different. Prongs were in different places and there were at least 2 different levels of prongs drawn into the seal matrix. It was a stink bomb. A few weeks back, the 2 boys were reading through Itachi's book, How to Screw with People, especially Little Siblings, and the intermediate pranks ranged from nailing filing cabinets shut to stink bombs. They already had the harmless explosion, flame pillar followed by ice wash, and they also had the paint traps. Now they were taking it to the next level. Sasuke ni. Since you have higher skill in shuriken jutsu, you may have the honor of filling out class with the smell of shit. Naruto gave a silent laugh afterwards. Indeed Naruto. Now watch the wonder of stink ensue. Sasuke spun the kunai in his hand before motioning Naruto to move the ceiling board. They were given full view of the Chunin search party and worried students. This was the first time that they pushed aside collateral damage all for the sake of a prank. Take this. Sasuke hurled the kunai down and impacted the blade into the Shikamaru's desk. When the kunai's tag started sizzling, Shikamaru awoke with wide eyes. He shot a hand to his mouth recognizing the seal matrix and ducked under his desk. Boom. Green gas spread throughout the room, entering everyone's noses. The academy students were on the ground screaming in pain and the Chunin were on the floor covering their noses as tears formed at the corner of their eyes. They were screaming in pain. The horrid smell was too much to take. Even Sasuke and Naruto had underestimated the power of the stench. When they opened their mouths to laugh at the misfortune of their classmates, the smell had found a path into their mouths. The instant disgust they felt caused them to remove their hands from their noses, allowing even more of the smell into their bodies. Naruto and Sasuke started choking on the smell, causing them to fall through the hole in the ceiling and land onto Shikamaru's desk, right at ground zero of the gas attack. After an hour, the gas had dissipated, but everyone was on the ground moaning and groaning in pain. Tears were pouring from Naruto and Sasuke's eyes as they had taken the brunt of their own prank. Even though they were severely wounded, they were able to communicate. So how many pranks have backfired on us? Sasuke asked. His body was so numb that he didn't even move his head to look at Naruto. That would be prank number 15 that backfired on us, Naruto moaned out. His eyes were dry and his nose was on fire. His mouth was parched, and his throat was rough. He wanted to throw up, but there was nothing in his stomach, for he had already thrown up from the stink bomb. Or stink tag, whatever you want to call it. Once the rest of the class recuperated from the horrifying experience of being in the middle of a gaseous form of a shitstorm, they looked at the 2 pranksters and glared at them, sending as much killer intent at them, causing the 2 to shrink even smaller than what they were. The 2 of them stared in complete fear of what was to come because what they had done. Iruka and another Chunin grabbed the 2 boys by the scruff of their necks. More specifically, their collars. The 2 boys were still too numb to even engage with conversation with one another. 3 weeks later, after their last prank, Naruto and Sasuke promised to themselves that they would no longer commit pranks of that scale in such a small room. It even got to the point that they weren't even going to commit pranks again. But then again, that was a prank too. You will never know what their plans are, unless they let you, because that means that you would have been extremely close to them to be let in on the prank. Or that was just for the sake of misleading potential targets of the pranking. In the meantime, since pranking was out of the question, Naruto and Sasuke started revamping their training with elements and such in the Uchiha training ground. Sasuke's known affinity was fire, but that was it so far. Naruto's affinity was wind so far as well. Sasuke had mastered the Gokaku no Jutsu, the Hausenka no Jutsu, and was showed promise in Kenjutsu. He was also extremely proficient in Shuriken Jutsu and Taijutsu. Naruto showed great promise. He had almost infinite chakra reserves, which meant that he could practically drool out A and B ranked ninjutsu without any problem. Naruto was also a stamina freak and was able to go on for hours without breaking a sweat. Naruto may not have had the genius skill that his Uchiha counterpart did, but he was determined. Naruto worked his off to master other jutsus within the Uchiha library. During his search, he and Sasuke stumbled upon a wind jutsu. It was easily an A-ranked ninjutsu. The Kazejana no Jutsu. The wind scythe technique. Naruto and Sasuke studied the effects and how to do it. The two of them dashed out of the library and toppled over each other in the training ground. Naruto quickly sped through the required hand seals and took a deep breath. Naruto spit out a large cloud of black ash. He felt his chakra sharpen each breath that trailed out of his mouth. Hidden in the cloud of ash was an arsenal of blades made from wind, slashing about, albeit weak, but it was still enough to cause some damage to the training dummies placed about in the training grounds. The two boys were amazed with the damage caused by the attack. Holy shit! Sasuke laughed. He coughed slightly though when he realized that the ash cloud was still around. Naruto, I don't think you did the jutsu right. What? Naruto wheezed. Do you think? Naruto was coughing out little clouds of ash and dust. I'm not some genius like you are. Sorry geez. Sasuke said. Anyway, Naruto said as he straightened up. They trained like that for weeks and months. Even on weekends and holidays, the two of them trained together non-stop. During all of this time, Naruto was less hated and more respected as time went. People started to see him as a person since the last loyal Uchiha was willing to hang out with him. There were still those who hated the poor boy. In the Hokage's office, Danzo, what are you doing here? Hiruzen asked with a slight sigh hidden in his voice. I have a report for you. The old war hawk said as he took a seat in front of the Hokage. Report from where, Danzo? Hiruzen said as he made a quick motion of his wrists. Suddenly, 4 Anbu came into existence and left just as quickly. The Hokage then sped through hand seals and focused up a silencing seal all across the room's different openings, windows and the door. Creases in the walls, and corners of the walls. Here, Danzo took out a large map of the Land of Lightning and rolled it out and spread it open for Hiruzen. My agents have given me a report from Hirayu-gai in the Land of Lightning. Danzo took out another map and spread it to reveal the entire city. Home to nearly 10 million people, the second largest city in the entire shinobi world, is also home to many crime syndicates that are ripe for manipulation. Hiruzen narrowed his eyes. These criminals are just a means to an end. I am not saying that we endorse what they are doing, but instead we, how do I say this, exploit what we have been given. Danzo gave the faintest sign of a smile. If you allow me to train more recruits for the root program, we can have a perfect information source in the Land of Lightning, and also we'll have a perfect bridge between us and the criminal underworld. Hiruzen looked up when Danzo leaned in. We could locate Orochimaru. Many weeks later. Naruto. Sasuke said flatly. But the duck-haired boy received no reply. Naruto. Still no reply. Dobi. Sasuke slammed his hands onto the desk he shared with the blonde. Oh. Naruto said as he snapped his head over to look at Sasuke. What is it? You were staring again. Shikamaru sighed. Why don't you get up and talk to her? Yeah, Naruto. What are you afraid of? Choji added while he stuffed his face with barbecue-flavored chips. We know Ino. She's like a sister to us. So don't worry, we'll put in a good word for ya. And no need for that. Naruto blushed slightly. Really? Sasuke and Shikamaru deadpanned. Really? Naruto replied. You could barely even look at her without drooling and going brain dead. Sasuke said with a laugh. You'll need something to kickstart the conversation, and I doubt staring will do the trick. Why don't you talk to Sakura more instead of just letting her rub up all over you? Naruto growled. She needs to impress me first. Sasuke said with a cocky smirk. Bah! The other three boys groaned out loudly. Kaki Uchihas. All right, Claw. Iruka said with a smile, but he was suddenly launched from his footstep by an exploding air tag, causing him to collide with his desk, that just so happened to have a cake. The instructor collided with the cake face first. Naruto and his group of friends were on the desks cracking up like no tomorrow. Naruto was wheezing. Sasuke fell out of his seat, Shikamaru was leaned back in his seat and Choji was holding his sides. All four of them were going to get it this time. You four are getting detention. Iruka screamed with his big head jutsu. Again. After learning about pointless things like why shinobi wear baggy clothing and why sandals are worn instead of shoes, the four boys were sitting in silence in the detention room. But they were suddenly accompanied by another boy. Kiba Inuzuka. Kiba. The four boys called out. But just as the words left their mouths, their heads were hit with 1,000-mile-per-hour chalkboard erasers. When the four turned their attention back to the front of the class, they saw Iruka with a slight scowl spread across his face. This is detention, not some social gathering. Iruka huffed and pulled out a familiar orange book. Naruto and Sasuke's eyes widened when they saw the book. Naruto's head tilted slightly. Sasuke nodded at him and raised his hand. Sasuke, no, you can't go to the restroom. Iruka said without even looking up from his book. I just wanted to know if you made it to the 10th chapter yet. Sasuke said with an innocent voice. Iruka's face turned beet red as a large perverted smile spread across his scarred face. His eyes widened when Naruto pulled out a maroon book and Sasuke pulled out a blue book. Iruka shut the orange book in his hands and looked at the two boys. What are you two reading? Iruka said while he narrowed his eyes. Lost at Sea Edition. Sasuke said. Lost Island Edition. Naruto replied without looking up. Of what book series? Iruka asked. Ika Ika Paradise. The two boys said at the same time. Iruka was about to reprimand them, but then Shikamaru, Choji and Kiba took out similar books. Space Edition. Kiba said with a small smirk. His book was gray. Beach Edition. Shikamaru said as he took out a box of tissues. His book was tan. Camping Edition. Choji said. But he was replied with balls of paper being thrown at him by his classmates, but he was surprised to see Iruka throwing paper as well. His green book was dropped from his hands. You're not cool enough, Iruka said with a scowl on his face. That was the lamest addition to the series. Kiba added with a disgusted tone. Come on, Choji. Here. The Desert Edition. Sasuke said as he tossed the boy a brown book. Hana and Riku. Let's just say, things get sandy, if you know what I mean. No, I don't know what you mean. Choji replied. Smack. Every male present in the room facepalmed. Sasuke sighed deeply and looked at Choji with a straight face. He reached back into his bag and pulled out the original Ika Ika book and handed it to the plump boy and took back the Desert Edition. Read the first one before you read any other, spoilers you know. Sasuke whispered and went back to his seat to continue reading the Lost at Sea edition. A few hours and various perverse giggling fits later. The perverts of the detention room got so caught up in what they were reading that they didn't notice the sun going down in the distance. They became so engrossed with what they were reading that they didn't get out of detention until it was 9 at night. Iruka knew he was going to get a mouthful from his boss. Alright, you guys, remember, the graduation exam is tomorrow. Get some rest and train extra if you want to. And thank you guys for a finally quiet detention. Iruka finished with a laugh. I never knew that those kids were into the Ika Ika series. My question though, is how did they get their hands on it? Naruto waved his friends goodbye and headed home to his run-down apartment in the bad side of the village. He sighed and walked quietly. His hands were in his pockets and his mind was elsewhere. He popped his neck and continued to walk at a calm pace, even though gangs were out at this time of the night. Naruto could smell the lingering scent of smoke and marijuana. He clenched his teeth and fists and continued forward to avoid any unwanted attention. He could hear footsteps coming from behind. He quickened his pace. They kept getting louder. Naruto walked past a lamp post and saw 8 shadows right behind him. He sped through hand seals and ran ahead to get some distance from his would-be attackers. He somersaulted and spun around on one foot to face his targets. When he went through the final hand seal, he took a deep breath and spit out a large cloud of ash towards the gang of delinquents following him. Fuden. Kazejana no Jutsu. The boy shouted out as the ash continued to shoot from his lungs. 1 was armed with a baseball bat, 3 were armed with brass knuckles, 2 were armed with knives, and the last 2 had lead pipes in their hands. Once the ash cloud washed over them, they started laughing. But it was cut short once the wind blades started flying through the ash cloud. Naruto took off running into the night, not even looking back once at the people he might have killed. He took to the roofs, mentally berating himself for not taking it in the first place. He made it to his apartment in no time and charged for his room and charged in and slammed the door shut. He locked all 30 locks and shut the windows. He charged for his bed and collapsed. That was too close. The next day, Naruto and Sasuke met at Ichiraku ramen stand. Well, Sasuke met Naruto while Naruto used up all of his money on breakfast. Naruto had finished downing his 15th bowl and smiled at the 2 chefs. Thank you, Gigi, Ayame ne-chan. Naruto shouted in excitement. You two are the best. Naruto lifted his final bowl and slurped the ramen broth clean from its container. Naruto reached out and grabbed Sasuke's wallet and pulled out 2,000 Ryo notes and slammed them on the counter and headed out towards the academy. I swear you're an idiot. Sasuke growled, slightly breaking the comfortable silence. Naruto looked over at Sasuke and found that his wallet seemed to be crying. It was empty. Not even dust bunnies resided in there. You used up all of my money on ramen runs. Naruto looked up to see Sasuke was crying as well. Dude, it's just money, Naruto said while placing a hand on his shoulder. It's my money. I wanted to use it for ramen too. Sasuke started whining like a 3-year-old girl. People were looking at the 2 boys with a weird look. Are those 2? An older girl whispered to her friend. Gay. I don't even know, her friend replied. The Uchiha is acting extremely weird. How could you do this to me? Sasuke whined loudly, making a large scene. It was my money. Naruto shut his eyes and slapped the Uchiha across the face, knocking him back to reality. Naruto's handprint was burned into Sasuke's pale cheek. It was a long silence. The demon boy just bitch slapped the Uchiha. Sasuke's left eye twitched slightly. Then it was the entire left side of his face. Then everything happened in such a quick blink of an eye. Soon enough, Naruto was on top of Sasuke, wailing on the Uchiha's face. Naruto raised his fist again and smashed it against Sasuke's forehead. People were cheering for the fight to continue, distracting Naruto. Sasuke flipped the boy over to where it was Sasuke that was on top and not Naruto. The black-haired boy gave Naruto the same treatment that he had received not even a second before. At the academy, Iruka walked with the caution of a cat. He was on all fours with his eyes narrowed. His students looked at him with terrified looks. I think Sensei finally snapped, Kiba said as he and Akamaru sunk into their seat. I feel uncomfortable watching Iruka Sensei do this, Ino said as she backed into her seat more. Uruka paid no attention to what his students were thinking. To him, it was a game of cat and mouse. It was catch or be caught. He was tired of being caught in their pranks. He didn't care if he had bonded with the two boys the night before over literary porn. Those two were devious children waiting to strike. Like the way shinobi should be. Suddenly, the classroom door shot open and in walked three people. One chunin and two extremely beat-up academy students. Naruto's right eye was swollen and his jumpsuit jacket was matted and torn up. He was holding it with his right hand, revealing the muscles he kept hidden, causing many girls to gasp and blush. Sasuke's left cheek was purple and black, and his shirt was ripped open in some parts revealing muscles in certain areas. Blood was on both of the boys' clothing. They limped over to their desks, but didn't sit down. The chunin walked down to the front of the class and gave everyone a smile, but gave a hidden scowl to Naruto. The chunin was named Mizuki. All right, Naruto, Sasuke. Take your seats, Uruka said from his position on the ground. Why yeah, Naruto hissed in pain. We'd rather not, Sasuke finished. The two of them were leaning on the backs of their seats. We got in a little scuffle with one another on the way here. Boys. Ino huffed and shook her head. Every girl did. All right, do you two need to go to the nurse? Uruka asked. Nah, no thanks. We wouldn't miss the test for the world. Sasuke said with a small smile. We both still have chakra. All right, then let's get this test started. Uruka said. Sasuke, come down. The boy limped down the steps and stood in front of his sensei with a look of painful confidence. Sasuke winced slightly but kept a straight face. All right, do a transformation technique, Uruka said as he looked up from his clipboard. Sasuke shakily brought up the ram seal and channeled chakra, transforming into another Uruka. After the instructors made a quick overview of the henge, they nodded and put their marks onto their clipboards. Sasuke then proceeded to dispel the jutsu and reverted back to his normal self. Very good Sasuke. As expected. Now on to the kawarimi. Mizuki said. Sasuke nodded his head and replaced himself with Naruto. The blonde plopped onto the ground while Sasuke was seated in Naruto's seat. Naruto struggled to get up. Sasuke then replaced with Naruto once again, but Naruto was now on the desk with his butt up in the air, only a couple of inches away from Ino's red face. Sasuke giggled slightly and turned his attention back to his teachers. Funny, Uruka said in between giggles. Anyway, on to the final part of the test. The bunshin. Suddenly all pain was forgotten for both Naruto and Sasuke. Oh, Sasuke said in his mind. Single quote comma dot single quote. Naruto groaned in his mind. His chakra control was only good enough for henge and the kawarimi, but there wouldn't be enough chakra control in the world for him to do a simple bunshin. Sasuke looked back to Naruto and gave a slight frown. He nodded his head anyway and formed the ram hand seal and focused enough chakra to create a movable bunshin. The clone turned and winked at the resident pink-haired banshee before dispelling, causing a massive uproar of fangirls. Naruto took out earplugs and stuffed his ears with them. He glared at Sasuke as he walked up the steps with a smug look on his face. Alright, up next is. A few people later, it was Naruto's turn. He walked up to the front and dived right into it without needing Uruka's instruction. Naruto instantly transformed into the fourth Hokage. He smiled at Uruka and dispelled the jutsu, wanting to get the test over as quickly as possible. Uruka was about to open his mouth to tell him to get the next jutsu ready, but Naruto beat him to the punchline first. Naruto switched with Uruka, and switched with a log outside and then switched with Uruka from outside and reappeared back inside in his previous spot. Mizuki was slack-jawed and almost dropped his clipboard. Hell, the entire class was slack-jawed. Ino especially was. Interesting, Ino thought with a small blush and the faintest form of a smile. Now, Mizuki said with a small smile. For the bunshin. Naruto took a deep breath and sighed deeply. He stretched and threw up the ram hand seal and started forcing chakra out of his body in tsunamis. As expected, Naruto used at least 500% more than the required amount of chakra to perform the Bunshin Jutsu perfectly. Ino tilted her head slightly and shrugged. Pop. I'm sorry Naruto, but you fail this test. Mizuki said just as Iruka entered the classroom. He sighed when he saw the Bunshin that Naruto created. The poor boy collapsed onto the floor. He was breathing hard and looked exhausted. It was a loopy, gray and dead Bunshin. Its arms were like floating noodles, and its head was flat. Its left eye was in its ear and its right eye was in its forehead, giving the already appalling clone a more grotesque look. One of Naruto's classmates threw up after looking at the clone. It's okay Naruto, we'll find a way to get you to pass, Sasuke said as he wrapped Naruto's arm over his back. After class, Naruto sat on his swing with Sasuke leaning against the tree that the swing hung from. Naruto was brooding much like how Sasuke used to. He had failed the graduation exam again. What more could he do? Naruto took a deep breath and sighed for the umpteenth time that day, no, that hour. Naruto was depressed and no matter how hard Sasuke tried to cheer Naruto up, nothing would work. Even Kiba, Shikamaru and Choji tried too, but nothing worked. Yo, Naruto, I'm going home now. Be safe bro and good luck. Sasuke said with a frown. Once everyone left the courtyard of the academy, Naruto was suddenly approached by the white-haired instructor from his class. Naruto. The Chunin called out. Hi, Mizuki-sensei. Naruto asked. I have a proposition for you. Naruto's ears perked up at this. What kind of proposition? Naruto asked. Somewhere in the forest surrounding Konoha. Naruto was staring intently at the scroll in front of him. It was fairly easy to get seeing as how all he had to do was go off into his Warok no Jutsu state. Naruto mentally facepalmed when he realized how many perverts were in his village. He shook his head and yawned. He threw up a cross-hand seal and focused chakra through the seal. Suddenly a few pops could be heard going off next to Naruto. They all looked at Naruto with aloof expressions. One reached out and tapped Naruto's arm, snapping him from his surprised state at perfect clones. Naruto smiled brightly at them. Kit. Naruto's eyes widened when the voice vibrated within his mind. The clones popped out of existence when his concentration broke with them. Who's there? Naruto asked out. Listen to me. Do not trust that bastard Mizuki. The voice told him. Why not? Naruto asked. Just don't. The voice sounded annoyed. Naruto flinched slightly but nodded his head. Good. Someone's coming. Naruto. Iruka called out in surprise. What are you doing with the scroll? Demon brat. Mizuki screamed out with a delirious tone lacing his voice. Iruka. Why must you get in the way of retribution? You aren't supposed to be here. Mizuki reached to his back and unclipped a large Fuma shuriken and hurled it towards Naruto. Naruto get down. Iruka tackled Naruto and shielded his body. Darkness. Naruto came to in a wet sewer at the base of a large cage. He looked closely at the bars and noticed complex seal matrices drawn and etched into the bars. He looked up and caught sight of a large tag with the kanji for seal on it placed as a lock for the cage doors. He was about to venture between the bars, but was blown back by a powerful wave of malicious intent. Hello, Kit. Our red eye. The gigantic red eyes were accompanied by a large widespread malicious grin. Naruto shivered greatly at the sight. He looked in fear and started backing away from the cage, but he was stopped by the loud and powerful voice. Kit. Stay for a while. I have a little proposition for you. The booming voice said in a feminine tone. Am I talking to a lady? Naruto thought. What kind of proposition? Naruto asked out loud. And who are you? I am the Kyuubi no Kitsune. The voice laughed. Tida, K Kyuubi. Naruto paled to the point he was near transparent. Where am I? Am I dead? Calm down Kit. We are in your mindscape. The Kyuubi said with a slightly annoyed tone in her voice. Wait, mindscape? Naruto asked out. Wait. I thought you were dead. No mortal can kill me. I am the most powerful and unstoppable Biju in existence. If you're so powerful, then what are you doing behind bars? Naruto asked as he took a seat on the floor of the sewer. Want to repeat that, Kit? The Kyuubi growled. I'm trying to offer you something and this is the thanks I get. Sorry. Anyway, what's this deal thing? Naruto asked while scratching the back of his neck. It is a simple power. It's a Kekkei Genkai of sorts. The Kyuubi said. A Kekkei Genkai? Naruto asked. Oh, like the Sharingan. Naruto smiled brightly. Precisely. Naruto nodded his head. So what do I have to do? Naruto asked. Loosen the seal on the cage. The Kyuubi said without hesitation. What? Naruto choked. You'll break free if I do that. Not if you loosen it just a little bit. The Kyuubi said in a slightly annoyed tone. But, how do I know if you're just screwing with me? Naruto shouted. Hey, the Kyuubi said. Stop your shouting. It's getting annoying. Sorry, Naruto said. Why are you giving me power? What's in it for you? All I want is for you to change how it looks in here, and a little extra as well. Kyuubi smiled at Naruto. What is this extra? Naruto asked. I'll tell your little adolescent mind what it is after you loosen the seal. The Kyuubi said, hoping that Naruto wouldn't ask any more questions for the time being. Fine, Naruto said after a 10-minute silence. It better be worth it. Don't worry, Kit, it'll be very worth it. The Kyuubi smiled brightly once Naruto came close to the gate. A large vortex shot up and raised the boy up to the seal. He got a little nervous and reached out for the tag. The Kyuubi gave the little boy a reassuring nod. Naruto nodded back and placed his hand on the seal and proceeded to tear off the seal. But before he could continue, a hand sped in and tossed the young boy off of the water vortex and down onto the floor of the sewer. The young boy looked up to see the silhouette of a tall blonde-haired man. But what really got Naruto was what the man was wearing. A white haori with the kanji for 4th Hokage stitched down the back. Why Yondaime H Hokage? Naruto gasped. It's nice to see you again, son. The man turned around to reveal Minato Namikaze, indeed, the 4th Hokage. Oh Minato. Cut it with the flashy entrances. Kyuubi groaned. What? Naruto was snapped from his stupor in an instant. What's going on? Naruto. I want you to meet your father. Minato Namikaze. The 4th Hokage. In other words, the one who put me here. The Kyuubi sighed. Why you? Naruto was confused. Wait, what's? Naruto's rambling was stopped when Minato grabbed Naruto and embraced him in a tight fatherly hug. Minato gave Naruto a reassuring smile. Naruto, I'm sorry for what I've done to you, Minato said with a frown. I didn't want to put Kura inside of you. Kura? Naruto asked. Yes, Naruto-kun. Kura is her real name. A voice said from within the cage. Naruto and Minato looked out towards the gate and saw a beautiful red-haired woman walk out towards the bars and walk out into the sewer. Who are you? Naruto asked. Suddenly the woman lodged her fist into his face, sending him racketeering towards the end of the hall. Her hair was floating like a demon would. Her fist was engulfed in a chakra-enhanced flame. Her eyes were twitching violently. Her teeth were barred. How dare you speak to your mother like that? The woman roared. Mother? Naruto asked incredulously. Why yeah, Naruto. This is your mother, Kushina Uzumaki. Minato said while trying to calm his raging wife down. She was known as the Red Hot Habanero, and I'm pretty sure you know why. Kushina growled as she started to calm down. I'm sorry, I had no idea, Naruto said. So, what are you two doing here? We changed the seal to allow us to speak to you when the seal becomes undone. Well, that's what I did. Minato said. I altered the seal to allow myself to freely speak with my baby boy. Kushina grabbed Naruto and embraced him with the tightest hug possible. Until your 16th birthday. Why 16th? Naruto asked with a slight frown on his face. That was all the chakra I had left, Kushina said. Now that introductions are over, can we please get back to what we were doing originally? Kura said with an annoyed tone. Yes, Kit. My name is Kura. Call me whatever you want, but just know that I can kick your no matter what you try to do. Sure, Naruto said with a slightly confused face. Good. Anyway, the Kekkei Genkei that I am going to give you will enhance your senses. All of them. Sight, smell, touch, hearing and taste. You will gain constant access to natural chakra. Natural chakra? Naruto asked. Yes. Natural chakra. That kind of chakra is needed to enter Sage Mode. Naruto nodded his head in understanding. Sage Mode is probably the second most powerful form for a shinobi to gain access to. Kura said. Through the Kekkei Genkei, you will experience physical changes, such as fox ears, tails, claws, etc. It is all a side effect of becoming a fox sage. Whoa. The Kekkei Genkei I am giving you will also automatically add your name to the previously unsigned fox summoning contract. Kura added. With your chakra amount, I think you could summon the boss of the foxes, my little brother, Keiji. Kura beamed. Upon activation of the Kekkei Genkei that is appropriately named, Jukei, you will automatically enter Fox Sage Mode. So can the tails be used for anything other than show? Naruto asked. Of course. It's point and shoot, Kit. Point and shoot. Kura smiled. Remember, the tails are an extension of your body. Never forget their use. In a life or death situation, they can prove to be the defining trump card that saves your life. So, what do you say, Kit? Kura asked. Naruto sat silently for a while and looked to his parents for their opinion. Kushina nodded her head and flashed 2 thumbs up and smiled brightly. Minato on the other hand had a thinking face on. Dad, what do you think I should do? Naruto asked. Just follow what you think is best. Minato said. Oh, don't be like that Mina-kun. Kura slurred the honorific. After all that I've taught you. Kura feigned a frown. That's the thanks I get. What do you mean? Taught you? Naruto asked. Where do you think Mina-kun got the Rasengan and the Hiraishin? Kura asked as she began to laugh. It came from me. Me. I gave him the formulas. I gave him the ideas. Yeah. Minato sighed deeply. Dad, it's alright. No need to feel so down. Naruto said with a smile. Tell me about it. I wanna know. Minato opened his mouth to reply, but his hand suddenly went transparent and started glittering. Minato gasped but nodded his head. He took a deep breath and coughed uncomfortably. Minato released his breath and sighed. It looks like my time is up. I'm sorry that I wasn't able to spend more time with you, son. By the way, tell Kakashi, if you ever see him or hear of him, tell him to stop reading porn. It's bad for his one eye. Minato and Naruto embraced each other one last time. Goodbye, son. And with that, Minato vanished into nothingness, leaving his mother and the gigantic 9-tailed fox apparently named Kura. Alright, so where were we? Naruto asked as he wiped away his tears. Oh, right. Let's go. The orange-clad blonde charged forward towards the gate and was once again raised up to the seal tag placed on the gate. He reached out and tore off the tag by just a millimeter off the gate. That's good enough, Kit. Push it back. I'm pretty sure that you don't want those changes to be permanent. Kura shouted worriedly. But Naruto didn't react fast enough, causing a massive surge of Kura's chakra. The resulting wave forced the boy into a wall behind them. Red chakra poured from between the bars, replacing the ankle-depth water, with 20-foot deep sea of red chakra. Naruto felt like he was melting. The red chakra was flowing out in tsunamis from the biju behind the bars. Naruto was literally swimming in red chakra. He focused some of his normal chakra and widened his eyes when he saw the distraught looks on both his biju and mother. Push the tag back into place. Kura screamed. Any more and you'll make the changes permanent. Read author's note at the end to get a better understanding of this ability. Naruto started swimming towards the gate, but too much chakra was flowing out and the powerful current kept pushing him back. Naruto felt weighed down. His muscles were on fire as the demonic red chakra seeped into his body through his pores. At the molecular level, the chakra was changing it, giving Naruto a more demonic feral look, but he continued to swim towards the tag. God damn it! Naruto growled as his canine teeth extended. His hair became wilder. Soon enough, the once blonde hair started gaining strands of red hair. For some strange reason, his eyes still stayed blue. Naruto's fingernails extended to that of an Inuzuka's. Naruto didn't care though, nor did he notice. He needed to get to the damned seal tag. After a few moments of swimming against the current, Naruto finally reached the bars and slammed his palm against the seal tag, effectively shutting off the flow of Kura's chakra. Naruto floated out onto the surface of the sea of chakra. Slowly but surely, the chakra was sucked into his body. Changes were made instantly. His whiskers were darker, and his eyes were deep purple instead of blue. Naruto's pupils were slits instead of circles. Kushi-chan, being in the presence of a large amount of my chakra made the genes of his father turn recessive and brought out the inner Uzumaki, hence the red hair. Kura sighed in defeat. But here is the bad news, Naruto, sigh way too much chakra flowed out. So that means, Kushina gasped. His Juke will be eternally activated. Kura said. In the real world, Naruto get down. Iruka protected the young boy from the large Fuma shuriken. Splash. Iruka groaned in pain as the blade dug into his spine. Iruka wasn't about to give Mizuki the satisfaction of him screaming in pain. Iruka gritted his teeth and clenched his fists. Naruto passed out below him, but suddenly, a massive blast of red chakra shot the instructor off of Naruto and sent him flying into a tree. The man was barely conscious, but woke up when he heard the shout. Mizuki was about to reach for his second shuriken. Taju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. The shout was demonic and feral. Iruka's eyes widened when he laid his eyes upon a red-headed Naruto. Mizuki was grabbed by a furry blood-red fox tail and thrown to the ground. Upon colliding with the forest floor, the hundreds of Naruto clones pounced upon the downed Chunin and proceeded to maul and mutilate the Chunin. No one hurts those precious to me. Naruto howled as he forced his claws into Mizuki's skull, tearing open the cranium. All around his clones wailed on the Chunin, to the point that after a few minutes, the entire forest was painted crimson. Pieces that once made Mizuki, were thrown about in different parts of the forest. His left eye would be with his right foot, while his right eye could be with a part of his heart in tree. Naruto left nothing of Mizuki. Once he finished cleaning up the trash, Naruto shut his eyes and let his 9 tails flow softly in the waves of wind flowing throughout Konoha. His purple eyes glowing maliciously in the moonlit night. He was covered in a red aura of chakra. Next to him were his clones resting. Naruto clapped his hands together and all of the clones dispelled, filling his mind with their memories and other such experiences. Naruto felt lightheaded. He lost his footing and collapsed onto the ground. The next morning, Naruto awoke with an extremely powerful headache. Much like the one he had the next morning after trying sake at the Uchiha compound a year ago. Naruto gripped his head in a failed attempt to calm the pounding pain radiating from his temples. He stretched his arms and soon enough his tails joined in. Wait, tails? Naruto's eyes went wide as plates as he reached down and held the one of the 9 furry tails coming from his. What the? Hey, Naruto. Watch your language. A rather terrifying feminine voice reverberated from within his mind. Ka-chan? Naruto asked. Who else would it be? Kushina replied. Naruto's mind went soft as a large smile spread across his face. Tears formed in his eyes. It was real after all, Naruto thought as the tears started falling. I thought it was a dream, I guess the tales are a given that it isn't, but wait. Naruto. It's me Kura. The Kyuubi said. Kura-ne. What's up? Naruto asked. Hey. It's been a long time since someone's called me that, but that's beside the point. Kura said. What is important, is the fact that because of the fact that you were submerged in 20 feet of my chakra for nearly 20 minutes in your mindscape, the Juke is now permanent. Oh, Naruto downcast. There's no way of tuning it off, is there? Sadly, there isn't. Adding more of my chakra will probably turn you into a demon, and taking out my chakra will kill you. You're stuck with it, Kit. Kura sighed. Oh well, at least I look awesome. Wait, I have red hair. Naruto was surprised. Naruto raised a mirror on his bedside table and examined his facial features. His hair had gotten longer, much like what his father's hairdo was. His eyes were calmer and purple. His circular pupil was slitted, looking a lot like the Kyuubi's eyes. He smiled and shut his mouth instantly when he saw how sharp his canines were. His whiskers were pretty thick too. He turned his head and found two fox ears, instead of his normal human ears. Holy shit, Naruto gasped. Wait, what's with my voice? Naruto shrugged and continued examining his new body. He also seemed taller. Once he gets measured, he'll find that he is actually 2 inches taller than what he previously was. He smiled and flashed his teeth. After a long silence, he realized that he felt a strong presence with the surrounding area. He could sense people's chakra, emotions and auras. Not only that, but when he focused his eyes, he could see chakra flowing into and out of his body in a steady stream. Naruto-kun, an old voice sounded from the other side of the room. Naruto dropped the mirror and looked to see the sandaime sitting in a seat in the corner of the room. He was stuffing his pipe with tobacco. I see that you're awake. Gigi. Naruto called out happily, flashing his canines. Naruto-kun, I suppose that you met the Kyuubi. Hiruzen said. How was it? You know I'm going to have to explain this to the councils. Oh okay Gigi. Naruto smiled and sat up. This is what happened. An hour later. So that's what happened. Hiruzen let out a long puff of smoke from his pipe. He nodded his head at Naruto and asked him to raise his shirt. Now channel chakra Naruto. The red-headed boy nodded his head and started channeling chakra. The strange thing though, was the fact that instead of his chakra being blue it was blood red. The seal seemed red but was still in perfect condition. What do you see Gigi? Naruto asked. I may not be a seal master like your grandfather, but from what I can discern, the seal looks to still be in perfect condition. Hiruzen smiled at Naruto. It's alright then. Come to the Hokage Tower in 2 weeks for your ninja registration photo. What do I do about this look? Naruto asked, changing the subject. I don't want people to attack me again because of me really looking like a demon. I will explain everything in a public revelation in a few days since you know about your father. Hiruzen said. Seeing as how easily swayed the civilians can be, they will be quick to accept you. Alrighty then. Oh, can I get new clothes? Naruto asked. A week later. Naruto had explained the situation to his 4 closest friends, Shikamaru, Choji, Kiba and Sasuke. They at first were weirded out by Naruto's new appearance, but they came to accept him without a doubt. They also found that sparring with Naruto was now nearly impossible, since he had mastered the Kage Bunshin, and the fact that since he will be in the Juke, he could sense danger whenever it got too close. Hiruzen watched Naruto's progress through his Kage crystal ball, since Naruto got out of the hospital. As a precaution, he had a team of Anbu watch Naruto and make sure that the seal hasn't weakened. He couldn't let the Kyuubi rampage the village again. As for Naruto's appearance, the boy got rid of the orange jumpsuit, and replaced it with a long-sleeved, high-collared, black shirt. The shirt had 3 metal plates that wrapped around from the front to the back of the shirt, with iron mesh in the inch-long gaps for extra protection. Naruto changed the cloth for his Hitai from blue to orange and wrapped it around his forehead like any normal shinobi. He wore standard baggy black shinobi pants and had ankle wraps and black shinobi sandals. The black mixed well with his red hair, orange Hitai, and orange tails that swished about behind him. Naruto was quite happy with his new appearance, and apparently, the rest of the village was. He lost his baby fat and had a somewhat leaner face. His muscles were getting more defined and his chakra capacity skyrocketed. Not only was he powerful, but the village was in love with him as they were finally filled in on the boy's heritage. Naruto was currently on his way towards Sasuke's house with the whole group together. He had his hands in his pockets. His high collar was waving softly in the wind that blew past his red hair. His tail softly swished back and forth after each step. Once he reached his destination, he heaved a happy sigh and opened the gates of the compound and walked up to see Sasuke doing sit-ups without a shirt in the training grounds. "Oi, shirtless duck head," Naruto called out with a laugh. "We're here. Sweet. I thought you guys weren't going to show." Sasuke waved at Naruto. "What made you think that?" Another week later, Naruto and Sasuke were on their way to the Hokage Tower for their ninja registration photos. Kiba and the others already took their photos and were on their way to the park for some cloud watching. The two tripped each other along the way and raced halfway. People were cheering for both of them as they passed, but they paid no attention to it. After they took their registration photos, they headed into Hiruzen's office for official documents to be signed and such. But once they opened the door, a little boy with a helmet charged through. He held a wooden kunai and had a goofy expression on his face. "En garde, old man. It's time for me to claim the Hokage seat." The little boy charged forward but tripped on his own feet and landed face first with the floor of the office. When the boy sat up, he glared at both Naruto and Sasuke. "You two placed a trap here, huh?" What? Sasuke asked. "What the hell is wrong with you, kid?" Naruto growled, flaring his chakra slightly. Naruto grabbed the black-haired boy by the scruff of his shirt. "Namikaze-sama, I advise that you unhand the honorable grandson." A man with black glasses called out from the front door. "Please. Yeah, let me go, oof." Konohamaru was met with Naruto's chakra-enhanced fist, and forced into the wall behind him, but was caught by one of Naruto's tails, to protect him from the potentially life-threatening impact. "I am on the shortcut to becoming Hokage." "Hey, runt. There's no shortcut to becoming Hokage." Sasuke quickly reprimanded. "I'm out of here. Come on, Sasuke." Naruto left the office with his tails clenched and his chakra flaring. Naruto was pretty pissed off. As the two walked out of the Hokage Tower, Konohamaru caught up with them. "Hey, what do you want, brat?" Naruto growled out, not even bothering to turn around to face the boy. "I want to know your names," Konohamaru demanded. "Uchiha Sasuke." Konohamaru's eyes widened. "Uzumaki Namikaze Naruto." Konohamaru was floored. "En Namikaze-sama." Konohamaru dropped to his knees and started bowing. "I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to offend you." "It's alright. Just get up before you embarrass me and yourself." Naruto picked Konohamaru up to his feet and set him down. "Now, for real, what do you want? Train me." Sasuke and Naruto looked at each other with the same look, surprise. They smiled brightly and nodded at each other and looked back at Konohamaru. Or in other words, their first disciple. Team assignments. Naruto took a nervous breath and headed into the academy expecting his teachers to beg for forgiveness, just as many of the villagers already have. The redhead also gained a fangirl base, just as Sasuke did. His new eye color and fox tails attracted many girls to come and try to get with the Uzumaki. At first he was weirded out, and now, he was still weirded out. He didn't really like getting chased by girls and stalked by girls. To quote one of his closest friends, troublesome. Naruto opened the classroom door and silently made his way to his desk next to his group of friends. He sat next to Sasuke and stretched his arms, causing his tails to stretch with him. His ears twitched slightly, causing many girls to giggle at how cute the boy looked. Naruto's tails wagged when he was laughing with his friends, and his tails tensed when one of his friends said something that pissed him off. Many girls were mesmerized by his purple-blue eyes. The long slit like the Inuzuka kept many girls staring. Naruto made sure to keep his attention away from such distractions. Many girls were starting to admire Naruto, and many gawked at how muscled he actually was. Even though he was 12, he was supposed to be a shinobi, and shinobi were supposed to be strong, right? Naruto was suddenly shoved from his seat by the ever-lovable pink-haired Banshee. She and a large group of girls converged on Sasuke, each one giggling out the Uchiha's name. Each one wanting Sasuke for their own. But at least out of all of these girls, Sakura had the most potential. Sasuke looked over to Naruto to see him taking a seat next to a blonde girl. Who else is blonde in our class? Sasuke took a moment to think. Since Naruto is no longer blonde then, oh shit. Naruto is sitting next to Ino. Sasuke started smiling brightly. Is this seat taken? Naruto asked politely. Nah, take it, Ino replied. But when she looked up to see who it was, she was instantly caught into the spell that Naruto's purple-blue eyes were. Nice eye color. Really? You think so? Naruto asked with a slight blush on his cheeks. Why yeah, purple happens to be my favorite color. Ino smiled. Score. Naruto cheered in his mind. I don't think we've been properly introduced to one another, Yamanaka Ino of the Yamanaka clan. She gave Naruto a sweet smile. Uzumaki Namikaze Naruto. He took Ino's hand and raised it to his lips and kissed the back of her hand. Glad to be of service. From that point, the two started off with small talk that led into bigger subjects and an even larger conversation about the most menial things. They talked about their lives at home, got a better insight on the other person's social lives. They talked about training, shopping, style, food, diets, weapons, jutsu, cooking and even gardening. Ino was surprised that Naruto gardened too, even if it was a small flower box that he used to take care of some flowers that he picked when he was a child. The two became so engrossed with one another, that they drowned out the entire classroom and concentrated on one another. Naruto's eyes were stuck on her sky blue eyes, completely glued to the brightness that they held. Ino was hooked onto Naruto's powerful and feral look. She didn't give a damn about the demon inside of him. All she knew was that he looked like a sexy beast. It was his eyes though. It looked like a mixture of blueberry and raspberry with blackberries. It looked juicy and so deep. She wanted to know more about him than what time would allow. All right class. Iruka called out. He looked shocked when his class didn't respond the way they should have. All right class. Iruka said the last part a little louder just in case they didn't hear him the first time. He was getting annoyed at this point. It was a good day at first, since Naruto and Sasuke stopped pranking people, but his class was being rude. All right class. Iruka activated the big head jutsu, scaring every conversation quiet. Save for one between a redhead and a blonde. The two were laughing softly and were still talking. Ino was blushing and Naruto was still telling his story. The two were completely oblivious to the class around them. Iruka walked up to them and held a large text book over his head and slammed it against Naruto's desk, forcing the two from their conversation. Hello, Iruka-sensei. Naruto smiled sheepishly. Shut up Naruto. Iruka walked back to the front of the class and picked up a clipboard. He took a deep breath and smiled. Alright, Team 1. Naruto and Ino started talking again but instead threw notes on paper. They giggled slightly and even spit silent raspberries at each other. Team 7. Your Junin-sensei will be Hatake Kakashi. Hatake Kakashi sounds familiar. It will consist of Uzumaki Namikaze Naruto. This elicited a few giggles and squeals. And Uchiha Sasuke. A shadow clone popped into existence and front flipped into the air and knuckle bumped Sasuke and dispelled shortly after. And Haruno Sakura. Many fangirls were whining and crying about not being on the same team as Naruto and Sasuke. Sasuke didn't mind, but Naruto was pretty down. Team 8. Your Junin-sensei will be Kurenai Yuhi. It will consist of Inuzuka Kiba, Hyuga Hinata, and Aburame Shino. Team 10. What about Team 9? Some no-named genin asked out loud. Iruka sighed. Because you. That's why, Iruka said with a straight face. Sasuke and the rest of the group were laughing, minus Naruto. The redhead is flirting with Ino, like no tomorrow. The no-name genin looked like he was about to cry, causing Iruka to quickly retract his word choice. Team 9 is still in action, sorry about that. Iruka cleared his throat awkwardly. Team 10. Your Junin sensei will be Sarutobi Asuma. It will consist of Akamichi Choji, Nara Shikamaru and Yamanaka Ino. Now that team assignments have been made, I want to give you all a parting gift of sorts. I want to say, thank you. Thank you for giving me the best few years of teaching that I have ever experienced. You all have learned what we were able to teach, and now you are at the steps to greatness. The ninja world is waiting for you and your team, so don't hold back and don't back down, because the will of fire burns brightly within all of you. Iruka gave a sad smile to all of them. Good luck, all of you. A few hours later, Sasuke was talking with Sakura while Naruto hung upside down from the ceiling using his tails. He was picking his nails with a sharp kunai knife. The three genin were bored out of their minds. Naruto more than Sasuke. He was an Uzumaki, so by default, the kid had some problem with keeping his attention on something. Soon enough, the young boy started swinging back and forth from the ceiling, using his tails as the chains that hold the swing seat. Sasuke ni. Let's prank our sensei for being so late. Naruto dropped from the ceiling and landed perfectly on his feet. Naruto got up and picked up an eraser from the chalkboard and placed it at the top of the doorframe, wedged in between the door and the actual frame. Sasuke sighed and got up and took out a brush for writing. The Uchiha dabbed the paintbrush tip in a portable ink container and started drawing a simple fire vortex trap modified for pranking people. Once Sasuke finished, he grabbed Naruto and the two started giggling like children and jumped behind Sakura and hid behind the desks waiting for their target to show. They didn't have to wait too long. Kakashi came and opened the door and was replied with an eraser falling onto his already gray hair, and to add onto that, the seal trap was tripped, sending a large vortex of fire to shoot up from beneath the Junin. Once the flames died down, it came to reveal a singed Kakashi with a few parts of his flak jacket still on fire. He had a lazy look in his eyes as he looked over his team. Sasuke and Naruto were on their backs rolling around and laughing like retards. Sakura was growling and had a look that spelled murder. Kakashi sighed and made one more overlook of his team. My first impression is that I hate all of you. Kakashi took a deep breath and looked up to the ceiling. Meet me on the roof. Dude, Sasuke mumbled over to Naruto as the three made their way up the stairwell to the roof. This guy is weird. I know, right? The redhead replied. Naruto cracked his knuckles and popped his neck. What if he wants to kick our? Ha, I highly doubt he'll be able to. Sasuke smiled. The last Uchiha, the son of the Yondaime working together as a team, who could stop us? A full-fledged Junin can. Kakashi said in a flat tone. The three genin awkwardly walked up and stood in a single file line in front of Kakashi. He was leaning against the railing with a bored expression on his face. Well, sit. Kakashi said it more like a question. Okay. Now that we are comfortable and sitting, how about we introduce ourselves? After looking amongst his students for a few seconds, he huffed. I guess I'll go first. My name is Hitaki Kakashi. I have many likes and not many dislikes. I don't have any hobbies that I can think of, and my dreams are none of your business. Kakashi then proceeded to eye smile at the three genin. Pinky, your turn. My name is Haruno Sakura. My likes are, she proceeded to squeal and take not so subtle glances at Sasuke. And training to get stronger. My dislikes are Naruto and Sasuke at times. Both boys raised an eyebrow. And my ultimate dream, she made the loudest squeal she has ever made. Her face was completely red. It almost rivaled Naruto's hairdo. Now that my ears have bled sufficiently, Kakashi deadpanned as he cleaned out his ear with his pinky finger. Your turn, duck hair. Jerk. Sasuke mumbled and straightened up. My name is Uchiha Sasuke. I like training, pranking and asserting someone. I hate manipulative people. My dream is rebuild the Uchiha clan and help the Dobi over there become Hokage. Sasuke jumped up to his feet and was picked up by Kage Bunshin in a pyramid formation. Okay. Kakashi shrunk into his seat on top of the railing. These two are a little too close for my taste. Yeah, we're done, Sasuke said as he went through a series of handshakes with each clone, before they dispelled. So now that leaves you. Kakashi looked to Naruto. Your turn, Firehead. I'm Uzumaki Namikaze Naruto. My likes are training with Ni-san, pranking people, and I love ramen. I hate people who judge others without getting the right information first, and the 3 minutes it takes for ramen to cook, Naruto growled slightly after saying that. My dream, no, my ambition, is to learn all of the techniques of my parents, and become an even greater Hokage than what my father was. Kakashi made a slight smile at his students. They really were something different. Kakashi sighed and stretched his arms and reached into his pocket and pulled out a familiar orange book. Naruto and Sasuke's eyebrows perked up at seeing this. Alright, now that introductions are over, meet me at Training Ground 7 next week at 5 in the morning. Don't forget, Kakashi said as he stood up to leave. Get extra training and I advise that you don't eat. Don't want you throwing up everywhere, Yano. Wait, Kaka-sensei. Naruto called out. There's something that I want to talk to you about, alone. He nodded at Sasuke and the other half of Team 7 walked down the stairwell to leave the academy. Naruto turned his attention back to his sensei. What is it, Naruto? Kakashi asked. You saved me that night, right? Naruto asked, getting straight to the point. That was you, right? I was. How'd you know? Kakashi asked. Kura told me. Naruto then went ahead to tell the events of that night in full detail to his new sensei. Naruto then looked at Kakashi and brought his explanation to an end. And then, To-san told me to tell you to stop reading porn. It's bad for your one eye. Ha, he should know that's never going to happen. Kakashi sighed and opened his little orange book and started reading. Kaka-sensei, Naruto said, have you read the beach edition? The next week, Naruto awoke in his new home. It wasn't the run-down apartment in the wrong side of town, but it was instead, the planned Uzumaki Namikaze clan compound. It was a large estate with 7 buildings in total. One building was for branch families, the largest building, the central, was for the main family, and the third housing building was for guests and such. The guest and branch family buildings were connected to the main house by a series of pathways that weaved around ponds and went over streams. The second largest building was the clan feast hall. There were large tables and an equally large kitchen for hosting large parties and celebrations. Across the courtyard, which held a beautiful sakura garden, was the armory barracks, for servants and weapons storage. The armory was filled to the brim with crates of swords, kunai and shuriken. Within the armory, there was a large dojo with 5 20 by 20 foot sparring mats. When Naruto first explored the compound, he found a hidden door in the armory that led to a long and dark stairwell that took him deep underground. There he found one of the largest jutsu libraries that he's ever laid eyes on his entire life. And the last and final building within the compound is the third largest, the onsen. There were 2 20 by 10 foot hot spring bath rooms for men and girls that are separated by the central hot spring. The central hot spring is a large 40 by 30 pool of water, with the deepest part going as deep as 20 feet. The central pool was used for pool parties and social gatherings taking place within the compound. Naruto walked out to the onsen and stripped and got ready to take a nice soothing bath in the squeezing warmth of the heated water of the spring beneath the compound. Naruto lowered himself within the water and sighed in happiness at how wonderful it felt. His tensed muscles loosened and felt relaxed. A big smile spread across his face. The fur on his tails got heavy and started weighing him down. After an hour or so, he got out of the onsen and dried himself and all 9 tails. He trudged over to the feast hall as he had 2 clones equip his leg weights and tail weights. He walked through the courtyard and threw some bread crumbs out to the ducks that swam about in the various ponds and streams that flowed throughout the sakura garden in the courtyard of the compound. He looked over to the armory to see a group of shadow clones training with katanas, naganatas, ninjatus, kunai and shuriken in the training grounds, and dojo. He slid the paper doors open to reveal the feast hall. He walked ahead of his clones as they finished clasping his weights onto his body. He picked up a cup of ramen and set to cooking it for breakfast. He looked up to see the large clock in the feast hall and found that the time was 0620 hours. He nodded at his calculations and finished up his quick breakfast and charged for the armory. "Excuse me," Naruto said to one of his clones. The clone moved, but then bumped into another, which caused a massive domino effect chain, causing a massive mess to ensue from them bumping into each other. It pissed Naruto off slightly, but he shrugged it off and grabbed some shuriken and kunai before heading out of the compound for training ground 7. Once there, Naruto dashed out to the field to see his team waiting for him. Sasuke and Sakura looked half dead. Kakashi had on his patented eye smile while his face was in between pages of his little book. Naruto coughed awkwardly and took a seat next to Sasuke and looked up at Kakashi. "Being late is my gimmick." Kakashi deadpanned. "Get your own." "I'm sorry." Naruto didn't even know how to respond to that. "Anyway, your Genin exam will begin today. I assume that you three used the week break to exercise and get training." After receiving 3 nervous nods, Kakashi pulled 2 bells from his pouch and tied them to his waist. "The objective is to get a bell from me before noon, so that leaves us with 4 hours. A reasonable time limit. If you don't get a bell, then that means that you will fail, and not only that, you'll get sent back to the academy for another year of instruction." "But wait, there are only 2 bells." Sakura paled slightly. "That means," Sasuke looked to Naruto with wide eyes. "One of us will fail no matter what," Naruto gasped. "Come at me with the intent to kill or else, you'll never pass." Kakashi smiled to himself, but instantly lost his poker face behind his mask when his students didn't scatter like what they were taught to do in the academy. He narrowed his eye at the 3. Something's not right. Suddenly 2 shadow clones charged from the foliage of the other side of the training ground while throwing a flurry of shuriken and kunai. Kakashi easily dodged the attacks, but when he looked back to his 3 students, they were gone. He backflipped and landed near the river of the training ground. Kaden. Gokaku no Jutsu. Sasuke took a deep breath and shot forth a large trail of flames that struck their mark on Kakashi. The Uchiha sighed when he realized that it was too easy. "Sasuke. Under you!" Naruto shouted out from the forest. The Uchiha nodded his head and put chakra in his legs, propelling him up into the air to dodge Kakashi's burial jutsu. The Uchiha backflipped and landed on the memorial stone. He jumped off and barrel rolled when he saw a barrage of kunai and shuriken being thrown at him. He looked up to see Kakashi charging for him. Sasuke rolled to the right to dodge an axe kick from Kakashi. The Uchiha did a handstand and started fighting Kakashi with his feet. The only problem was that each kick was being blocked by Kakashi's forearms. The Junin was quickly getting bored with the fight and lodged his knee into Sasuke's chest, sending him back into a training post. Kakashi was about to go over there and check his vitals, but the boy disappeared in a puff of smoke, revealing a log in its place. Of course, wait. Kakashi narrowed his one eye and looked around nervously. The ground exploded around him, kicking up large clouds of dust and dirt, revealing 20 Narutos charging from beneath him. 2 pairs of hands shot up from underneath him and grabbed his ankles and wrapped changeable leg weights and focused enough chakra to make the leg weights go to nearly 700 pounds. Kakashi was surprised when he couldn't move. "Let's get him." All of the clones landed and started wailing on the poor Junin. Amidst the chaos, Sasuke and Sakura grabbed the bells from Kakashi's waist. Even when the 2 genin already got the bells, the Naruto clones continued to beat up Kakashi. Naruto and Sasuke were surprised that clones were able to do this to a Junin-leveled shinobi, while Sakura was questioning whether or not her sensei was really a Junin. During the mosh pit, one of the clones slipped and his hand was held open to grab onto something for balance. That thing just so happened to be Kakashi's mask. Boom. All clones were blown back and dispelled. Naruto, Sasuke and Sakura were thrown back into the training posts. Each one landed with back-cracking collisions. The three genin looked in fear as Kakashi rose from the ground. He unclasped the leg weights and started growling like a pissed-off dog. He raised his Hitai to reveal a Sharingan eye, much to Naruto and Sasuke's surprise. "You three, or so," Kakashi's voice was grave. His mask was off to reveal a pristine face. Probably the most handsome that the three have ever seen. Not that Naruto and Sasuke would ever say that. They're straight Yano. Kakashi looked at them with a bland look and smiled brightly to reveal perfectly white teeth. Passing. The three were quiet. The original objective was to get the bells, but somehow you even managed to move down, not one, but two masks. Kakashi smiled even brighter. I told myself that if anyone was able to successfully remove both masks, I'll stop wearing them. Kakashi started laughing. I didn't really think that would happen from my genin team, but, ha. The three were quiet for the sole reason that there was an unasked question floating around in their minds. That is until Naruto raised his hand. Yes, Naruto. Kakashi asked. Why, why were you wearing two masks? Naruto screamed. Kakashi was taken aback by his volume. At first, Naruto seemed to be the calmest of the group. Apparently he was wrong. Isn't one mask enough? Truthfully, I don't really know why I wear two masks. Kakashi gave a wry laugh. Now it's time to live Ryu's dream. Suddenly, Kakashi, Sasuke and Naruto started giggling perversely. Okay, I'm getting creeped out. Sakura started backing away from her perverted sensei and teammates. Kaka-sensei, what was the point of this test? Oh, how could I forget the lecture? Kakashi plopped down onto the ground and sat in front of the three kids. The whole point of this test was teamwork. Teamwork? Naruto asked. Yes, teamwork. The Cyclops lowered his Hitai over his Sharingan eye. There is a saying, a shinobi who neglects the rules and regulations are trash. That much is true, but my saying is, those who abandon their comrades even in the direst of situations are worse than trash, no matter the mission. Kakashi gave them all a genuine smile. I've been through 16 teams, and all of them failed. The three genin paled. But you three have the most potential that I've ever seen in a team. Kakashi closed his eye and nodded his head. Good job. Come here tomorrow. We start missions immediately. Yada. Naruto cheered. He and Sasuke shot to their feet and chest bumped each other. They were laughing and high-fived each other. Sakura joined in and the three got pulled by Naruto's tails and they were embraced in a really tight hug. Celebrate, kids. I'm off. Yane. With that, Kakashi popped away in a small explosion of smoke. So, wanna come over to my place? Naruto asked. I have an entire compound to myself, so it's all out partying for the Konoha 11. What'd you say? Definitely. Sakura smiled. What time though? 7 is good. Naruto said. Sasuke, if you find any of the group members, tell them about the graduation party at my place. Alright. See you later, bro. A few hours later. Naruto smiled at his handiwork. Everywhere, the compound looked like it was ready for a celebration. Lights and food was out for the friends coming. Music was already playing and his clones were having dance battles with one another. One of his clones came in with the rest of Team 7 and Team 10. Hey guys. Naruto called out. Hey, Ru, too. Ino started staring at Naruto. The redhead completely forgot that he wasn't wearing a shirt. Hi. Her breath hitched slightly as she looked at his well-toned body. She inwardly smirked. He's pretty ripped for a pre-teen. Hey Ino. Naruto replied with a polite smile. Grr. Naruto gripped the side of his head tightly. Damn it. You stupid clones. Team 7 and Team 10 turned to see a mosh pit forming in the designated party floor. Tons of clones were fighting each other and bashing each other with whatever weapon they could find. Their fists, their tails, their claws, and even their teeth. The damned clones couldn't be trusted with even the simplest of tasks. Naruto threw up the ram seal and channeled his chakra. Soon enough, every clone dispelled. Naruto let out a sigh and shook his head. He turned back to his friends and nodded his head. So, how you guys enjoying yourselves so far? Naruto asked. He ran off to find a shirt and opened the door for more guests coming in. An hour into the party and it was going great. Ino being Ino, she called up a few people and within the first hour, there was nearly 100 shinobi in the compound partying and dancing. Naruto was pulled by a large group of girls and forced into the center of the dance floor. The only problem with that was that Naruto was in the middle of a conversation with Ino. Well, Ino pig, I see you getting quite acquainted with the resident redhead. Sakura winked at her blonde friend. Oh hush, forehead, Ino said as a blush made its way onto her cheeks. But, what's not to like? Aha, so you or aren't you? Sakura nudged the blonde. Do you like him? Well, I do, Ino growled at Sakura. Why am I telling you? Because, I'm your best friend, that's why. You are but, hey. Don't sugarcoat your intentions. Ino blushed harder. I'll take that as a yes. Sakura smirked and walked off to dance with Sasuke. Naruto was having the time of his life at this party and finally made his way back to the blonde looking quite lonely at the table. Naruto shrugged at it and plopped down next to Ino. Even though they were new friends, they clicked, making their conversations long and productive. Even though their friendship is only a week old, they felt as if they've been friends for ages. The two were in a way, perfect for each other. Naruto and Ino never had a boring conversation. During the week-long break for extra training, Team 7 ran into Team 10 and the 6 genin decided to help each other train for the coming test. Ino saw Naruto's strength at its fullest form when he sparred with Sasuke. She couldn't help but blush at how powerful the redhead was. She loved how synchronized he was with his movements. It was like he was dancing. When he'd land on his hands, he would send out his tails as an offense and defense. If that didn't work, a duo of shadow clones would distract his target, giving Naruto the perfect opening for the deciding bout of taijutsu. Ino was enjoying her memories so much, that she didn't notice Naruto waving his hand in front of her face. Naruto looked at her with a worried expression. Ino was launched from her trip down memory lane and gave Naruto a warm smile. Are you okay, Ino? Naruto asked. I asked you if you wanted to dance, and then you went blank. Oh, hey. Team 8 is here. The redhead shot from his seat and tackled Kiba into a table. The dog boy retaliated, and with a laugh, he flipped Naruto over and body slammed a clone that Naruto kawaramied with. Kiba pushed himself off of the ground and smiled at Naruto and grabbed him into a hug. I see that you are still an idiot. Kiba laughed. Can't help it, Yano. Naruto and Kiba burst out into laughter. With the final team there, the party finally came into full swing. Dance-offs, just dancing, eating, and spars. This wasn't just any party, it was a shinobi party. A team of Naruto clones brought out a large 30 by 30 foot sparring mat and rolled it over the dance floor. Naruto pulled up a seat and stood on it and raised a hand to silence the party. Once everyone was quiet, he made a quick scan of everyone and noticed that Junin senseis were also at this party. Not only that, but Kakashi kept his promise and was mask-free, and he was living Ryu's dream. Kakashi was surrounded by female Junin and Chunin. Well then, I am happy that many of you came to celebrate the Konoha 11. Toast to me and my friends, Hyuga Hinata, Aburame Shino, Inuzuka Kiba, Team 8. People cheered for the three and patted the three on their backs. Kiba gave Naruto an approving nod. To my friends, Nara Shikamaru, Akamichi Choji and my newest friend, Yamanaka Ino, Team 10. Everyone cheered even louder. Many male genin were whistling at Ino. And finally to my sister and brother, Haruno Sakura and Uchiha Sasuke, Team 7. Sakura's jaw dropped slightly. Tears of happiness formed at the corner of her eyes. She'd always wanted a brother. Sasuke sped through some hand seals and shot off a series of harmless firework jutsus. Once the cheering and congratulations died down, Naruto hopped off the chair he used and got down to the sparring mat. Now then, for the main event of the party. Who wants to go first? Naruto asked with a bright smile. Sasuke walked calmly to the mat and removed his shirt and flexed his muscles for the kunoichi present, causing them to squeal in excitement. He looked at Naruto with a smug look on his face. The redhead nodded his head and had his tails tear his shirt off, revealing his body for all of the kunoichi to see. Some were decked upon seeing it, putting some hurt to Sasuke's ego. Let's go before this turns into a strip contest. Naruto and Sasuke charged at each other with the intent to kill. Naruto went first with a leg sweep, while Sasuke sent a roundhouse kick. Sasuke's eyes widened when that happened. Naruto's leg sweep connected, and Sasuke flipped over on his side. But before Naruto could follow up with a ground and pound, Sasuke punched up and smacked Naruto in his jaw, sending him careening close to the border of the sparring area. Once he crosses that line, it's over. Naruto hopped over to Sasuke and used one of his tails to grab Sasuke by his leg. He pulled Sasuke over, causing him to face plant with the ground. Some of the shinobi present flinched when Sasuke hit the ground. Naruto swung his tail around and hurled Sasuke towards the border of the ring. It would have been a win, but Sasuke flipped over and did a 360-degree spin on his outstretched right hand and landed on his feet. Sasuke charged forward and jumped up with his knees held out. Naruto charged forward with his knees held out. The two collided in midair, and proceeded to throw punches and kicks. Naruto's left hook was blocked by Sasuke's right arm, and his left hook was blocked by Naruto's right arm. The two spun around in midair with their backs to each other. Sasuke sent his right elbow and Naruto sent his left elbow. But the two collided, hitting their funny bones. The two boys fell onto their sides wailing in pain while at the same time laughing. Every person present sweat dropped. Round 1 is a stunning tie. Kakashi called out as he stepped into the center of the mat. Soon enough, a man with a bowl haircut and a blinding green jumpsuit jumped over the high walls of the compound and landed in front of Kakashi. Kakashi, my eternal rival. The man shouted. I made a guy challenge you, Hatake Kakashi, to a sparring match. If I lose, then I will walk around the entire village wearing only underwear on my hands. And if I can't do that, then I will do. Geez, Naruto-kun, Ino let the honorific slip. She shot her hand to her mouth as a deep blush forced its way to both the redheads and her own. Naruto's eyes were wide, but so was his smile. Well then, I didn't know that you saw me that way, Ino-chan. Naruto said with a slight smirk. Ino led him to a seat and got some ice and wrapped it in a napkin and placed it against his now purple elbow. Well, now you know. Ino looked away. So not even denying it. Naruto laughed slightly. Wait, Ino-chan. I'm kidding. But before her fist could hit Naruto, Kakashi flew out and landed on Naruto, flattening the seat and flipping the table behind the redhead. Guy was jumping up and down screaming about the flames of youth, and such. Many shinobi went to see if Kakashi was alright while the rest started sparring amongst each other. 6 months later. Half a year goes by and Naruto and Ino still aren't together. Even though half the village wants the two to get together, they won't, based solely on the fact that they are too afraid of what might happen. Team dynamics within Squad 7 was that of a family. Kakashi, the eldest brother, the role model. Sasuke, the second oldest, and the most confident. Naruto, the lovable annoying little brother. Sakura, the lovable loud little sister. Because of the way they respected each other, the team was on its way to become the best that Konoha has ever produced. But then again, they fought amongst each other constantly, like a real family would. The sad thing about Team 7 was that they don't have family anymore. Well, Sakura doesn't have any siblings and her parents are always away from the village and only home for a few days if not hours. Kakashi's father committed suicide, Sasuke's brother murdered the entire clan, and Naruto's parents gave their lives to save his own. They were grateful for what they had. Naruto groaned loudly as Tora, the abominable demon cat, tore through his fifth shirt. It was a pain to constantly buy new ones, and the metal plating cost quite a bit to add to his clothing. He narrowed his eyes at the raging cat and was about to stick it with a three-pronged kunai he found hidden in the jutsu library. Cat hates me because I smell and look like a goddamn fox, Naruto rambled. Bitch-ass cat. Calm down, Naruto. Kakashi mumbled. The one-eyed shinobi couldn't help but agree with Naruto. Even in his own genin days, Kakashi had trouble catching the damn cat, even when it was a kitten. Just try not to kill it. Why can't Sasuke or Sakura hold this, demon? Naruto screamed, causing Tora to start clawing its way through his fishnet undershirt. The redhead stopped and held the cat out towards Sasuke and Sakura. Both shivered violently and hid behind Kakashi. You already know why. Kakashi sighed. Sasuke needs therapy for what happened last time, all four shivered. And Tora apparently hates the color pink, even though I thought cats couldn't tell what color is. Sorry Ni-san. Sakura gave a small frown. Yeah, Naruto. Sasuke looked down. Wait, I know. Naruto threw the cat up into the air. The redhead shot out all 9 tails and wrapped them around the cat and encased it in such a way that it was like a furry cradle. Tora was trying its hardest to break free, but to no avail. Team 7 sighed happily when Naruto kept his tail length high above them. They walked up to the gate guards and nodded their heads in the slack-jawed Kotetsu and Izumo. They too had to catch the demon cat on many occasions. Each one was much worse than the previous. The two of them gave a wry laugh and started clapping when Naruto walked by. Along the way to the Hokage Tower, Team 7 was cheered on by various shinobi teams and veterans of the Catching Tora mission. Naruto waved his tails around and showed people the feudal position that Tora was in. Some of the shinobi blew raspberries at the cat as it tried to claw their faces out. Sasuke started getting over his fear of cats, and Sakura was starting to feel more confident in her hair color. Upon entering the Hokage Tower, they were quickly led up the steps and then they entered the mission assignment room. There stood the Fire Shogun's plump wife with a large box filled with Ryo notes. Once she saw Tora, Naruto moved his tails out towards her and released his prison on the cat, dropping it into her arms. The shogun's wife was ecstatic to have her precious cat once again and held the poor animal in a killer bone-crushing hug. She picked the heavy-looking box of money and placed it on the mission's table. Hokage Dono, you never cease to produce such wonderful shinobi. The lady looked over to Team 7 and beamed a bright smile. I want them to be my permanent Tora catchers. Kakashi, Sasuke and Sakura paled to the point of transparency. Sasuke looked like he was about to start hyperventilating. The poor boy was about to have a mental breakdown. Sakura subconsciously reached her hands up to her hair and started mouthing incoherent sentences. Kakashi was mentally debating whether or not he should don the double mask again. With all due respect, but we cannot accept such a title. Naruto said using his diplomatic skills, since his team has been turned to mush. We would love to accept a mission like that, especially since the pay is quite large, but we are a team of shinobi. Naruto finished as he dropped down in a deep bow. His tail swishing softly behind him showing how calm he was. Oh, alright, I guess I can use a different team then. The shogun's wife frowned slightly. I have a suggestion though. A devious smile spread across his face. Hiruzen saw this and was about to start laughing. He isn't a shinobi yet, but when he becomes a genin you should request these 3. The lady pulled out a notepad and a pen and motioned for Naruto to continue. Moegi, Udon and Sarutobi Konohamaru. Oh thank you. Here is some extra pay Hokage Dono for having such respectful shinobi. The fat lady then left with probably the biggest smile drawn across her face. Hiruzen looked at Naruto and gave an approving nod. The other mission room attendants were snickering at the rest of Team 7. Naruto kicked Sasuke, which brought him back to Earth. He tapped Sakura, waking her from her stupor, and Naruto waved an Ika book in front of Kakashi, awaking him as well. Well, you know how the mission went, Hokage-sama. Kakashi said, as if what had just transpired didn't happen. We're ready for the next mission. Well, we have washing dishes for a handless person, walking a legless dog, feeding a blind man. No. Sasuke squealed out like a fangirl. There was an awkward silence that echoed throughout the room. I mean, Sasuke cleared his throat. Team 7 as a whole has more potential for a C-ranked mission. You brats. Iruka shouted at the three kids. He went on to explain the chain of command. Genin was the lowest, then to Chunin, then to Junin. He explained that orders were orders. After a few minutes of talking, he realized that no one was listening to him. Naruto was talking to Kakashi about one of the chapters in the Lost Island edition. Sasuke was asking Sakura about proper skin and hair products to use. Sakura was asking him for fashion advice. Iruka looked around to see some of the shinobi attendants playing cards and building houses out of mission scrolls, like idiots. He then looked to see the Hokage asleep. Damn it. Iruka sat down slightly embarrassed. Hokage-sama. What's going on? Hiruzen looked around with sleepy eyes. I was listening. Anyway. Iruka. Fetch me a C-ranked mission scroll. Iruka nodded his head and left the Hokage's side to get the mission. Iruka fished through countless missions and picked one that seemed to be the simplest one. Iruka opened it and read over the details. Mission type. Escort. Client. Tazuna of the Land of Wave. Destination. Land of Wave. Duration. 2-3 weeks minimum. Objective. Protect the client from possible bandits and highwaymen on his way to Land of Waves, and protect him as he finishes his bridge. Rank. C. Iruka nodded his head and rolled the scroll back up and walked out to the main room and handed the Hokage the scroll. Hiruzen read over the mission parameters and nodded at the assessment and tossed Kakashi the scroll. The Junin read it through and gave a small impressed smile. He looked up to the Hokage and nodded his head. All right. Bring the client in. The door opened to reveal a scraggly old man with a jug of moonshine sake. Even at probably 10 feet distance, the team could smell the terrible odor of lingering alcohol and smoke. The old man did a quick look at his guardians for the duration of the next few weeks and heaved a heavy sigh. He did a double take on Naruto and his opinion on the team did a complete 180. I think I might actually live. Tazuna gave them all an approving nod. Meet me at the south gate in an